What's up, pre-Chiro students, Chiro students, maybe even professional chiropractors that find these dialogues interesting? But today we have a special guest, Kat Andersen, a chiropractic student about to graduate really soon, coming to us from Life West. Kat, can you kind of just get us started by sharing what you were doing in life when you decided that you wanted to become a chiropractor and how that really shifted things for you when you started to focus on this path?
Hi, Ben. Yeah, I would love to. I had a quite atypical, like 180-degree switch. I was actually working in pharma, and I was working on drug development and discovery and taking it through FDA.
Mm,
And I got really sad there, seeing the business side of it, realizing all of my time was going towards something I really didn't believe in.
mhm.
And uh, Yeah, I got, like, pretty depressed actually, spending my time doing that, and through one thing or another, found Emily Mayo. She's was my first chiropractor. She teaches MLS, and she's down in San Diego, and somehow convinced me to go to a chiropractor, even though that was, like, so far out of my idea of what, I needed. My partner at the time convinced me that I needed it, and it resolved so much in my life that I didn't expect, that my eyes just, like, opened to that path.
Mm.
Um, and there was a mention of chiropractic school, and it was, like, one mention, and as soon as one person mentioned it, I was like, "That's what I'm doing. That's there's no ifs, ands, buts, like, that's my path. That's where I'm going." And I
Mm.
kinda didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but I'm
Mhm.
glad I did it.
So if I hear you correctly, you were already kind of out in the real world working. You had a career that you had already taken a couple steps down that path. You were working in the pharma industry, and I don't think you could just get a job out of high school. You already had gone to college and then started that, or maybe how
Yeah,
did you get?
chemistry degree, like, full on working in the industry, had a career,
Yeah,
like, on that path.
yeah.
Yeah,
And how many years into that were you?
I think 5.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So you started chiropractic school not fresh out of college, but several years later, and you still. So how did that transition go of you going back to school and you entering back into like a graduate level education? Let's just talk about the academic side first. How was that for you?
It was really interesting. I mean, I promised myself I would never go back to school once I graduated undergrad. And the first couple quarters, I got almost straight A's. I was really into school. And there was a breaking, I mean, being in a career and, like, I'd already done the party thing and I didn't really need to do that. And um, I was more focused on school than, like, becoming a chiropractor. And um, it was like quarter 3 or 4 where I just realized that I was getting straight A's and I was trying so hard, and I absolutely was gonna be a terrible chiropractor if I continued down that route. It was like a come to the light moment, kind of.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so that was an interesting year of figuring that out.
Hmm. And I think that's like a real big key shift that students make when they recognize that classes are not the deciding factor on the outcomes that you have after school, and just also like really reprioritizing what's important as a chiropractic student. Is it important to get those A's? Is it important to know all those details on those tests, or do we need to really look at what's the skill set that a chiropractor that's successful in the real world has, and how can I move towards that? Can you talk about what became more important than these A's in your classes, and kind of how you adapted your schedule or how you adapted the time spent outside of class after that?
Yeah. I mean, man, so choosing to have an entire adjunctive education like in addition to chiropractic school, is the mental game of that was probably like the most difficult because the classes are intense. There's a ton of them. Boards are not super fun. And then on the side of that, there was this like deep realization that if I really needed to learn, if I really wanted to learn the skills that I saw the people who I respect practicing as, uh, it was a whole nother like double time. And there it went from being going into a test like afterwards being like, oh, I would love to like compare test scores after, to being like, we're just going to trust that because I am showing up in my purpose on this adjunctive education that I'm going to pass these things, because it's really not important that I need to learn how to like read EKGs. It's not important. But what is really important is knowing when you touch somebody's body, if they're having traumatic experiences come up in their tissues, how to be there for it, like actually be there for it. And nobody teaches you that that's not true. There are some teachers at our school that show up with that information, but mostly you have to go figure that out yourself. And so what that was like was an incredible amount of trust and just doing it, regardless of the fact that it seemed impossible. Like, yeah. Finals week got a lot more hectic, but life got a lot more filled and rich as well.
And the fact is this is not going to change for any students coming in the future, students that are in the program now. You're going to have to get through these classes. You're going to have to pass your boards if you want to get licensed. And you're going to come to a realization, like Kat just mentioned, at some point, maybe hopefully before chiropractic school even starts, that you need a parallel curriculum, that you need to supplement your education with these other trainings that either take place on the weekends, take place before school, after school, during your breaks at school. Can you talk about how wild it starts to become when you realize how much you have to develop within yourself and how little time you have to do it, and how you're just racing at times to the palpation labs, or to these seminars on the weekends in between studying, to kind of really fill yourself up so that you're ready for the real world?
Yeah. I mean, the big silver lining to this whole thing is that if the school did teach those things, which they do teach very useful things, like it's not like they're just, useless, but so that I've learned a ton from school, but it doesn't mean that I didn't need the adjunctive education as well. And the best thing that came from it is the mentors that I did get exposed to, because I needed to go seek them. And like, it is expensive to go that path, but there's not really any other option in my mind. And the craziness and how wild that gets. You go to a seminar where you're doing, these deep dives into indicators and or subtle body, physical body, understanding chiropractic, like truly the philosophy of it. And in the process of that kind of a deep dive, like stuff comes up about you and you have to process it and deal with it and work through it, and stay grounded. And it's funny, it's like, and all the while learning how to adjust on each other, which is at the very beginning couple quarters, like you're just subluxating each other. And so you watch people subluxate the heck out of each other, like so frustrated, trying to learn these like wild adjustments that seem impossible. And, the, the self-judgment comes in, and like not being enough. And you have to work through all of that, or you'll just stop and just be like, I can't handle this right now. This isn't
Mhm.
what I'm doing, I'm gonna wear an EKGs or whatever.
Mhm.
And so it's such a funny thing, like diving so deep into this world and then stepping out of the weekend and then being like, now I'm gonna go take a test that doesn't matter. But the part that did matter about it is the ability to ground. Like that's the people say like, oh, this is initiation or whatever. Chiropractic school is an initiation. And like, what does that really mean? Like, do people really need to be this miserable for 3 years? Um, and and from that struggle comes an incredible amount of ability to ground and stay in your sovereignty of what you think is important and moving after that while the world tells you you need to be doing something else around you.
Mhm.
And that's pretty priceless, and it's totally hectic.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
Yeah,
did
no,
you
I wanted
did
to
you
keep. Huh?
did you have a similar experience? Is it changed much? Is that the same?
Yeah, no, I think it was really beautiful how you described that there's this organization that you're supposed to fit inside of, and that could be metaphorically society when you get out of school and you're a chiropractor in society and nobody knows what you do, but they want you to be therapeutic. They want you to fix their pain. They want you to be something that maybe you don't see yourself as. And that's similar to being a chiropractic student where you begin to take on this sort of image in yourself that you're moving in a direction of like, I got to develop the artist within me. I have to become more subtle in how I pick up on people's energy or how I listen to people or how I relate to people. And then there's this other structure that you're being forced to fit in. And I think that that's a great metaphor for just being a chiropractor. But something you said there of like in the beginning of school, everybody is really just kind of being kind of rough with the adjusting and the palpation. And I think that that's something that could also be changed if we had a bigger runway earlier on to develop subtle touch to start to appreciate the refinement in touch. And I think that every incoming student should have at least 50 to 150 hours of touch ability development. So I appreciate you mentioning because I also had that experience of like just not wanting to be palpated. And that way I didn't get to palpate others as much as I would have liked to because I didn't really want to be touched by a lot of my classmates because they had no background and I was already a massage therapist doing craniosacral. So it was like,
Oh, that's awesome.
it was awesome. It
Yeah.
was awesome. And that's the inspiration from this project is I was already doing things that were to me setting me up for success in chiropractic school that nobody really ever hears like, oh, you're going to chiropractic school, maybe you should learn about the craniosacral system or learn about how like the depth, how subtle a touch for the craniosacral could be. But anyway, moving on. So you get clear on this new path of like becoming a chiropractor. What did you prioritize? Who became your mentors? Like which groups did you start to hang out in? What was that like?
Um, so I'm a really interesting mix of like I have this hard science background, and I also like very much have through chance recognized the world around me as very non-physical, and also through my studies. And I remember I went to the fair and walked up to a table and had gone down this rabbit hole of sacred geometry at some point and how it just shows up in the world in the craziest ways. And somebody was at one of, or Anthony O'Brien was at one of the tables and was like, oh, it's like the sacred geometry of the body. It's like first quarter, day one, day 7 or whatever. And I was like, cool, I'm signing up for that. Like there's magic in that. And really, really grateful for that just because if those words hadn't been said, I'm not sure I would have found my way to BGI and Newman craniosacral that early, just because I had no idea what I was doing or like what chiropractic was at that point.
Mhm.
Um, so I went to the first BGI lecture. Eric Rubin absolutely beautifully, without any incorrect uh, or anything incorrect or any inconsistencies, like laid out some quantum mechanics stuff, which is a class that I had taken. And I was like, who is this human and how does he know that? And how is he so beautifully tying it into chiropractic and the world that we exist in? Um, and that was like, I had no idea how much this man had to teach me. I had no idea how little I really knew about the world around me. And so I got into Eric Rubin, which led me into the BGI teachers, which led me into John Martinez, who I think you actually went to school with, right?
Yeah, we started together. We practiced together every day in the side labs. John's still a good friend of mine, and yeah, John's my boy.
John Chiro. Yeah. And just like so much gratitude towards Rubin and Martinez. Like the chiropractic aside, what I've learned from them, it's on my life is completely different.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, I would not have known how to stand correctly during an adjustment or like be in my body during an adjustment without Martinez. I straight up wouldn't.
Hmm.
With all of my training in yoga and all that stuff, like still wouldn't know how to do that.
Hmm.
So so grateful. Uh, and then craniosacral, and yeah, that that whole path, I just went straight down it and didn't look back. Partially because I would have liked to diversify more, and I'm currently doing that now that I have the time. But the thing about it is that I watched people not know that it was there too, and not understand that the necessity of learning how to work with the subtle body during chiropractic. And I also went really hard on like trying to get people to come to club and be in the seminars and like so that because people don't know it's there. Like I wouldn't have known it was there. People just don't know it's there. They don't know that resource exists, and they don't know what it means to be that prepared to go out into the world. And like they don't realize that that's the path that will get them there.
Hmm.
Um, and it's a bunch of hippies, kind of. So
Kinda, but if we're being real, to get to chiropractic school, you have to be a certain level of like academic, which is not really tied to just being out of touch with, you know, going to become a doctor and getting a license to practice. When you first enter chiropractic school, you're not really thinking about like the hippie side of you, even if you have that in your background. You know what I mean? You're more thinking of the professional. I'm going to become a clinician. I'm going to go and take care of people in a way that it resonates with me. But you, like you said, there's a whole nother world of understanding when you actually step into seeing yourself as this healer, as this person who's a listener, who's a observer, a conscious observer of others. So yeah, I hear you.
it's a big responsibility, and that freaked me out a couple of times during school. There was like a couple of times where I had to like stop and take a couple deep breaths and be like, this is this is my path. Like I trust myself to be on this path. I'm gonna continue on it. That little bit of the imposter syndrome that comes in and is like, you can't do this, and
Mhm,
it's not true. And that's another reason why I'm so grateful for the mentors. Like
mhm, mhm.
yeah.
What are some things that you see can be improved, just based on your current observation, being at the end of the program? Obviously, you had a different experience with the pandemic, kind of being in the middle of your education, but um, how can you see the student experience within chiropractic education be improved, not only for our incoming students to learn about, but also maybe just for some current students?
Um, I mean, that's such a hard one. I think that so I would change so much about that curriculum. I um it was eye opening. I got almost all A's the first year, and that was all the material that was on boards part one. And then when the pandemic hit, I was like seminars and how little work can I do in school. And my boards part 2 and 3 scores were really good, like solid. And my boards part 1 scores, the one that I tried really hard in school for, were really bad. Still passed, thankfully, but like not great. And that
Mhm.
was eye opening to see uh, how inefficient this system is and how much time it's taking up from the students and how little it's delivering. And then you look at that for palpation, you look at that for analysis of the spine, you look at that. I mean, man, I remember I'm currently in an SOT office, and I'm so grateful that somehow life has taken me and thrown me into that
Mhm.
because I've been working on a lot of the like more feminine qualities of chiropractic, and the SOT is like very structured, very masculine, very like XYZ, and
Mhm.
it's really good for me to have both of those diversifications. But I
Mhm.
remember the moment that I realized that we don't go over unstable SI joints one single time in our program. Not once do we go over how to work with an unstable SI joint.
Mhm.
And the realization that there's not much conscious thought on how to help people become really good chiropractors. I think it's mostly taken. That energy is mostly taken and thrown towards the business side of it, and I think that's going to be detrimental. But
Mhm.
I would love to see people take control of that education who are really good clinicians. Like if they could just drop everything else and only hire people that are such good clinicians,
Mhm.
I think chiropractic would change overnight. Like the
Mhm.
profession would shift immediately.
Mhm. And you mean not only in the chiropractic context of like how to take care of somebody who's a baby, who's a horse, who's a dog, who's got an unstable pelvis chiropractically, but also in an interprofessional sense, like because just to be honest, I've just taken a look at what some people would say is the more you know, I don't want to say medical side of chiropractic because they're not trying to introduce medicine, but they're trying to fit and play and use the same magic language that medical doctors respect, like build up your curriculum vitae so that when you introduce yourself to a medical doctor, you show them all the different background that you have and speak to them about research. Like, are you talking about that type of clinician, or are you just talking about being a chiropractor who's able to see and has experience working with all these different populations, special populations?
I mean, as you can guess, definitely the latter, right? When I
Yeah,
say really incredible clinicians, I mean people who have a referral based practice.
yeah,
Um, People who, when somebody walks in the door, they know how to work with them. They know how to analyze them. They know how to work with all the different personalities of a human,
yeah.
it drives me crazy. We have a business class, and one of the ideas in it is that you need a ideal patient.
Hmm.
um Drives me crazy, but
Yeah.
but yeah, uh
Just because we attract who we attract and whoever shows up, and you're not going to necessarily always be able to target one specific type of person with the same mentality and the same body conditions and blah 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 blah.
yeah, and also I think it's a little bit detrimental to shift away from referral based practice to business based practice.
Mm,
It takes a lot of the responsibility off the clinician to be good at what they do,
mm,
and puts it on pretty languages, and
mhm,
like it gets people in the door, but at what expense to the profession,
mhm,
and what expense to the clinician, and to what expense to the people walking in your door, right? Like, what if you took that time and instead learned how to be a really good chiropractor?
mhm,
And that's one of the reasons that I chose all the mentors that I chose. Is I looked at them and I was like, none of you market. You don't have to.
right.
Like you. are really good at what you do. You really care, like deeply to the bottom of your heart, like you care and you
Yeah.
put that in action in learning. Like you're humble about it. You continue to learn always. Um, yeah. And I think that if we like turn back to that a little bit, it could be really helpful. And part of that would be getting those people in control of the curriculum at LCCW, which is like a dream of mine.
I hear you.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, no, I personally, I think there's like a happy medium. I also haven't really marketed. Our practice hasn't really been marketed for a really long time, but I'm not necessarily proud of that. And I do think
Mm.
that marketing can come from within. And there's this inside out approach to chiropractic practice where you develop material and content based on like what's really just happening and, capturing moments and we just don't do enough of that, I think, which is why I say that we don't market. However, I hear totally what you're saying is like totally lose focus of like who you are, which is the person that's supporting others when you're really just trying to go out there and get as many people as possible by any means necessary. I hear you.
Yeah, I know, and I know what you mean. Um, the office that I'm at right now is actually really good. They're called Primal Chiropractic Practice in Missoula, and they're really founded in the philosophy, and also they have like a full Instagram, and but the things that they're posting are authentic to like like people that are showing up in the office. They show up in cycles, and it's like, why is everyone C2 lighting up this today or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
And the marketing is like based around that, which is it's fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
what does C2 represent, and how do we ask those questions, and like what are we bringing up? So it can be fun.
What does C2 represent to you off the top of your head, just with like the immersion that you've had?
Oh man. So C2 is really interesting. It shows up, I see it a lot in like babies and their toddlers, like people that walk already and their parentals. And a lot of the time it starts to pop out. And this is also, a lot of this comes from Bgi and Martinez. I didn't just like make this up. But this like curling over, when you start to like curl over and like a lot of the times when you're like not proud to keep your head up, like you're not proud of your life, or you're like afraid of something, or there's something like gnawing at you that keeps you kind of like curled in, that C2 will end up like popping out in the back.
Mm-hmm.
uh, or like sometimes it's purely just physical, like you play the guitar a lot and you're like this,
Mm-hmm.
right? It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to always be spiritual, kind of.
No, I'm a big fan of body psychology. I always like to just throw it in when I'm talking with people about it, like specifically in the practice. But I think that it takes people, uh, yeah, it just kind of like changes people's perspective for a moment that everything is not physical. So,
Yeah, yeah, mind, body, spirit.
yeah,
Yeah, that's yeah, and
sweet.
it's interesting to watch people who didn't believe in that then get into practice and be like, "Whoa, now we have to work with this," right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm. Do
yeah.
you have a genuine concern for a lot of the students that are coming out of school who didn't have the like good fortune of connecting with the types of mentors you did and practicing with the types of peers that you have? I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not everybody. It's probably I don't want to throw a percentage at it. You would have a more accurate perspective than me, but are you are you a little bit like, oh, this is how our profession got to kind of have a lot of misunderstanding with the general public just based on how you're observing your peers at school and knowing that many of them haven't done what you've done and kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish it wasn't that way. Um, it's a hard there's a little bit of pessimism in me about, and there's also a ton of optimism. Like there's a ton of routes that you can go. You don't need to go if you're not like as woo as me, you don't need to go the BGI Numa route. Like You can go do AK. AK is so cool. SOT is so cool. There's some really deeply chiropractic things that you can go do that aren't BGI or SOT. And I've seen people like go hard in that direction.
Mhm.
And that makes me really happy to see that. You know, I'm like, I want to get adjusted by you. I'm curious. Like, what is it that you know that I don't know? Um, that being said, there's a ton of people that like they just feel the restriction and they go through it and it'll help for a little bit or a certain population or whatever, but it's not really gonna um, it's not chiropractic at its truest, deepest nature, and it's so much more powerful than that. Um, and it is a lot of time and money to be spent without actually diving into chiropractic. And the fact that you can do that, you can go spend 250K on an education and get out the other side without an education is concerning for both the people getting adjusted by those people and the people who maybe don't realize that they don't have that education and yeah, and are calling it chiropractic, but I don't want to be that judgmental because at some level it is, you know, like they're not doing chiropractic. They could just do so much more for their time and money. And you know, I do believe that any type of chiropractic is better than none. So uh,
Do you see some like resentment though with the students that aren't kind of lit on fire from within for like what they get to go do, and they're somewhat confused as to why they joined this program, or they have some remorse as to like, I chose to become a chiropractor, but I am not really fully committed to this because it hasn't shown something to me that inspires me. Like, do you see a lack of inspiration in certain students? And or do you have you seen a lot of people drop out of school? um what's that been like, just observing kind of the student body, and seeing students sign up for one thing and then find out it's something else, and react or respond?
yeah, um, yes, all of the above. Like I feel incredibly lucky that I've had an education in the past that has taught me how to do hard science studying. So I could just based off of my past experiences kind of handle both routes. And had I not done that previous education, I don't know that I could have, right? Like I would have been learning how to study, which is incredibly time consuming.
Mhm.
And by the end of school, I think that I would have really hated chiropractic, honestly. And I do see that in other people, like, mm, you know, people that end up like drinking a lot during school or just mm, being not really there, like not present, and then not knowing what to do after school. And like,
Mhm.
I think we have a massive rate of dropout, right? Like where you graduate and don't practice, which is insane for 250K education and like
Yeah.
something that can be so beautiful and so fulfilling. And like, why is that? And like, how do we, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's sad because it's not that difficult of a problem to fix, but it's seemingly insurmountable because of personalities, maybe.
I mean, the way I see it is the education system is dictated by these guidelines, these regulatory guidelines. Like, you have to get through this content because your students are going to take tests to get licensed on this content.
Hmm.
So that's the focus. However, every school has these clubs or these different sort of outlets that they've created out of recognition that students need more than what's been dictated by the regulatory bodies. However, it's still dealing with that. So I think that this pre-Cairo concept is the place where we can establish a foundation where students can have experiences, a diversity of experiences, a variety of experience, and then develop this sort of insatiable curiosity within that, wow, there's all of these different pathways available to me. I'm really interested in these three or four. when I get to school, I'm definitely going to like focus on those to figure out which one is the right one for me. But like before you make this huge decision, like you've mentioned how expensive it is a couple times, because it's like it is, and that's how much my student loans have become after years of not really paying them that much. Because I'm on a different sort of path of trying to get them forgiven through the service loan forgiveness program, which I think every chiropractic graduate should consider being their route, just because it's 10 years of paying the minimal amount on income based, so that you can be theoretically paying about 50 to 70,000 when it's all said and done.
That sounds nice.
It sounds really good, right?
Yeah.
And also getting to take care of the people that you already were going to take care of. Like there's this, not that I am jumping around now, but like when you get out of school and you've been on service trips, you're used to taking care of people for nothing, or for a banana or a coconut. And so that's like your orientation to receiving for something that you just spent years of your life dedicating yourself to providing. And so we deliver with so much consciousness, but we don't really work as students, especially where you're at, as receiving consciously, like not the
It's true.
monetary piece, but like also like, what am I going to do with this money once I do receive it? And how
Mm,
much money am I comfortable receiving at first? Because most of us go through this process where we start at a number and then we go to another number and then another number, and we eventually get 5, 7, 8 years in practice, and now it's like $20 more per adjustment than it was when we got out. But are we really doing anything different? And maybe we were providing better adjustments when we first got out than we are 7 years later. So it's really interesting. It's very nonlinear to think about the path of a chiropractor, but we also need to create a framework, a structure that students can feel supported in, so that you know a lot of this can be minimized that you're talking about. Um,
I
yeah.
love that. Yeah. I think that's an incredible idea. Like I would have, yeah. I watched some of my massage therapist friends that came into chiropractic school, and I'm like, just man, you guys did it the right way. Like I wish I would have taken your path, because it really makes a difference to be working with the body before you get in school. Like massive difference. And there's some struggles there too, but yeah.
Yeah, go through as many struggles as possible before you sign up for this really expensive education that's just going to be a lot more struggles. So,
Yeah, and like know what you want and know how to get there. And that's priceless.
so what's been forming inside of you as far as just I feel like once we get to where you're at in the program, you're about to graduate, or you already graduated?
I graduate in 3 months.
3 months. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're at the end. The way that I'm kind of structuring the chiropractic student experience is these cycles and like growth cycles. And, it's like a 12 to 14 to 16 quarter process. So I'm kind of doing it in fours, where it's like the first quarter, or yeah, the first quarter of this cycle, you're just getting exposed. The second and third is like when you're really doing the hard work. And then the fourth one is like where you're reflecting, or you're giving back, or
Mm.
you're leaving a legacy, or you're doing something that, because you have this capacity now that you didn't have in the first, second, and third part. So it's like you being at the end of the program, you have a lot of capacity to really see what's needed, not only for your student community, but also just for um, so many different aspects that, is this conversation is not long enough for us to go into all the details of what could be improved. But could you kind of touch on what's been inspiring to you, maybe that you journal about, or that you're in the visioning process of, just to share, not to spill like your secret business plan, but just like to share what's inspiring you these days?
Oh man.
I mean, you being a BGI sort of president, vice president, officer, facilitator, organizer, and you talk about like just leaving that behind, and like the legacy that you've been able to try and, or like what you've added to that group or to that community that's been really beneficial to the next series of students that are going to come through that?
Yeah, I mean, man, I was so grateful that I found that my first quarter, and that I was really, I feel like I was actually able to help bring that information to students at the end. And it's so fun to watch somebody's eyes light up when they find their first track and they actually like feel it, both energetically and physically in the body. Um, and that, I mean, that was one of my favorite things about that, like between like boards and school and all this stuff, like still trying to find time to do that. Didn't realize like how much energy that would give me. And so like giving back is not exactly the easiest thing in the world in that program. It also, because of how time consuming it is, it's also incredibly energy giving, like remembering why we're here kind of thing. Um, and I think it's similar in chiropractic as well. When you've been adjusting somebody for a couple of weeks and then they finally like kind of get to the core of why they're there, and they finally like say something, and like we're watching their body shift over time, and like they become safe, and they finally maybe admit something to themselves that they haven't been vulnerable enough to themselves their whole lives, and that's the like seed for them to change their lives. uh, there's nothing like there's no amount of moving a restricted bone that can beat that.
Mm-hmm.
There's really not. And just like bringing more awareness that is possible in your practice, like truly changing people's lives, like truly and honestly having that big picture, like ripple effect, changing people's lives is somewhere deep in there. If you came to chiropractic school, like part of your calling, and having that be remembered from me through my work, and like hopefully through things like this, that you're spreading this like information. And I definitely want to be able to support I mean, right now I can't support students, but down the line, like I want to be a part of keeping that integrity of the program, of students, of chiropractors somehow.
Mm-hmm.
It just feels really important to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you touched on identifying the things that are energy giving, right? And this project has been really energy giving to me. It's kind of like my creative outlet when I'm sitting in class and I'm not relating to what's being spoken at me. And I'd rather just reflect on, okay, how could this class be more chiropractic oriented? Or what could I do for the next generation that can help them go through this class and see the connections, if there are any, to tease out. And sometimes you really have to get into the nitty gritty details to tease out the connections to chiropractic in some of these classes. But I think that was like me finding something that helped me keep my sanity and helped me keep me inspired. And to this day, I really just journal on a regular basis, like things that are related to this project. Obviously, other things are inspiring me in life. But I think that thinking through like what you just described, the power of changing somebody's life, and if you could change someone's life who's going to go and change other people's lives, then that's like the big idea, right?
Yeah.
And metaphoring the education to chiropractic, like the big idea, or the biggest idea, as I like to call it in chiropractic, as a profession, as a vehicle that's trying to relate to the world. The big subluxation or disconnect is that the students in BGI Club at Lifewest don't talk to the students at BGI Club at Life University nearly enough.
Mm.
They're not working on collaborative projects that could potentially add to the collection of work, the body of work that BGI is bringing forward. We don't have schools speaking to schools. So we don't have any collaborative projects in, say, the research department at one school and another school pooling their funds, pooling their resources to bring forward the body of work that chiropractic education is capable of bringing forward, given that they have these students that are, I don't want to say locked in their programs, but they have the students, they have the energy, they have the resources in numbers. But anyway, power in numbers. I just think the big subluxation is that nobody's really connected, and we're a profession that's all about connecting. So it's like very incongruent. And as long as the profession is disconnected from within, it's going to remain disconnected to the outside, because we don't have a unified force. We don't have a power to, like, you know, collaborate on a message campaign of what you've been talking about for the last 45 minutes, which is like these deeper levels, which I don't think anybody in the general public has ever heard or been exposed to unless they've experienced it on the table, and the chiropractic student body for that matter.
Yeah, I agree with you. I had a really interesting moment when I heard that Palmer was shutting down, where I realized that I was contributing to that subluxation that you're talking about. I was like, oh, Lifewest is better than Palmer, which is just like, it's a lie. It's like a trying to keep things separate and better. And I was like heartbroken when I heard that Palmer had shut down, and realized that actually I may have contributed to that some way on an energetic level, and just like holding my belief systems of how we shouldn't be collaborating or whatever. And I have a friend that like works at Palmer and is like an amazing chiropractor, and I love him, and I really respect him, and the whole thing, I just like that realization too of like, wow, I've been contributing to this, and there's something that maybe some way I can shift my thinking or the way that I interact with people that could help this profession blossom rather than, shut down. So it's really cool to hear you say that, because I don't think I've really had time to process that enough and really understand that, and that's a really cool reflection.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for bringing it out. I think that this conversation led me to share that, but I do think that it's been decades at least that this has been perpetuated. I only have that viewpoint, by the way, because I did transfer schools. So I went to a school in the Northwest up in Oregon, which is way different than the experience down in Hayward. And I saw how those students up there were never going to get that exposure that we had the good fortune of having down here. So I was just like, gosh, this is like really messed up. I would have potentially never been exposed to what you just described, like the BGI, all the other things, Eric Rubin. I would have never known about any of that if I went to all these other schools. And I think that, there's a certain piece within people like Eric or John that doesn't want to be like projecting out into the internet all this information.
Yeah, it's true.
Because it's like all about having a direct experience. But at the same time, these students at these other schools kind of need to get exposure and want more. And so
Yeah.
I'm not putting the responsibility on those two individuals. I'm just saying, if they don't want to do it, somebody else kind of has to bring the essence that you've experienced through these groups that you've been involved with. I just want to see that essence like show up on these other campuses, and the other campuses might not even let that in, which is why the internet is the kind of, the
It's an
great,
awesome tool.
yeah, the great connector. So
I love that. Yeah, that's making me think about things I haven't thought about that are really important.
so what would you do if you could do a collaborative project on behalf of BGI with multiple schools involved?
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's such an interesting question, because like you have to meet people where they're at too, and BGI can get pretty out there, but actually, if you follow the trail, it's really not that out there, and I think it can be presented in a way that makes a lot of make like it just makes sense. and like maybe I don't know, it would be fun to have an event that's actually fun. And oh, I have no idea. This is a good question. I mean, what would you do? Like, I don't. I think I have this block. Like, I don't know if I could even